Welcome to the lecture series on object oriented analysis and design. So, we are looking at use case driven development, which essentially brings the business into focus. That is exactly what we want to do first. Seemingly different domains, seemingly different stakeholders, but there is one very promising, well established common link, that is software. So, we would want software to come in, but then it should be driven by the business. We have tried test case development, user centered development, all these we have been looking at in the earlier lecture. The concern here is that we should have a project manager that can balance out why the business should look at operations most of the time, but then also facilitate the development to enable better operations. That operational excellence using software is essential, and we have been trying to look at it because different businesses are different businesses. Some people may want to lift a lever, some people may want to switch on a remote television, depends on what the operation is. Multiple operations are there, and we think that business to operations even now tends to be built around a set of skills. However, this needs a bit more formalism. What is the kind of formalism? Requirements. We need to still talk about requirements, but then not go beyond requirements and look them only as change requests. We need to have requirements to drive the development. Towards that end, we have not lost sight of these most important activities called functionality, usability, reliability, performance and supportability. This we want to feature very quickly using object oriented analysis and design. The design constraints, operating systems, environments, compatibility, application standards, very quickly we know where we are deploying. The use case which is right at the top, the diagram 1 which we draw will factor all these things. The organizational process which is all there, legal and regulatory requirements. So, we need to understand very carefully that each one is something which we have to really keep in mind, and use case very nicely manifests first as a functionality. That is the goal. You please understand that a use case will take you through all these, but then the manifestation of a use case very quickly is oriented towards development, that is the functionality. We have spent a lot of time talking about functionality. As I said, if 30% of the requirements are reasonably stable, it is a divine blessing. So, we did that through functionality. Eventually, what is it that we want the software to do? Support us on functionality. We raced quickly to functionality, and we spent more time on this, almost oblivious of all other things until the fag end. So, now we think that we will start with the use case whose first manifestation is functionality. A use case is a specification of a set of actions performed by a system which yields an observable result, that is typically of value for one or more actors or other stakeholders of the system, used to describe a functional requirement of a system. This is how it is. Representation is like this. So, yesterday we were talking about a simple example of having a water facility, drinking water facility in a 4-storied building. We identified that there are 3 categories of the people: one who cleans it, one who services it, one who simply drink water. All 3 interact with this provision of where we take the water from, but they do it completely differently. So, we create a category of people as simply drinkers of water, a category created for people who want to clean the machine, a category who want to service the machine. It does not stop there. Use case will tell me where exactly it should be located. Some provisions will be made which tells me that use cases are usually described in text. They tell the story of the interaction between actors and the system, how they interact, what it is. It is nicely convertible into a good diagram. Someone or something outside the system that interacts with the system, that is absolutely essential. This particular idea called actor is not at all part of the system. It is outside the system. It communicates. Association shows the actor and the use case communicate. Use case defines a piece of functionality of the system. Use case specification, basic flow of events. So, as I keep telling, it makes a bit more easier to visualize what we are planning to do if we talk like this, like we began with. There is a snack vending machine. If we start thinking about from the perspective of the fellow who is not at all connected with this machine, neither he is a maker, neither is a maintainer, he is simply there coming whenever he wants to buy a snack. Start thinking from that direction. That fellow is the actor, customer is the actor. What is he wanting to do? He wants to balance the calorific value and his wallet, the money, the cost. Give them facilities how they want to work around, what they want to do, different types of snacks, different, maybe the other next snack vending machine will have cool drinks also, anything you can talk about, different snacks, calorific value and money, that is all. He is not at all concerned, he or she is not at all concerned about what exactly is being sold. By the time he walks up to the machine, he or she, they have decided that we will pick one, we will pick something. It is just that purchase, these are the available things we want to purchase. He is not worried about how they are coming in. He trusts, he or she trusts that the validity is still there, it is not an outdated item, it is not something bad to consume. Use case specification, basic flow of events, alternate flows, error flows, sub flows, for everything you can define. Drinking water, again we go back to that example of drinking water. What are all the possibilities? The fellow can vanish with the glass, can happen. So, what is the requirement? We need the chain. As we understand it from this direction, we are automatically building an operational level detail. What is this fellow wanting to do? Drink a glass of water. Glass is there, water is there, accidentally, they are not doing anything intentional, just a mistake, common mistake. We go away, we forget the pen, we borrow the pen, we do not believe in giving back is not the idea, we forget, just like that. So, most of the times it is a simple trick which we play. If you are lending the pen, keep the cap with you. Very likely that the fellow who borrowed the pen will want to look at the cap instantaneously and remembers you and gives it back. Simple techniques. So, please understand that at an abstract level of a question, can you lend your pen? The answer is yes, very confident. Yes, it has happened, good chance. Occasionally I did lose 1 or 2 pens, but that is fine. I do not use very expensive pens, they are all very easy. Over a span of 5 years, maybe 2 to 3 occasions where I lost my pen did happen, and most of the times it is not a fresh pen. In other words, as a person who is answering this question, can you lend your pen? I said yes. I do not think of any other things, it is all done. But then the use case will prod me into documenting so many things. A use case based approach will tell from which we will see requirements, not merely the need. The need is obvious, somebody wants a pen and I want to get my pen back. The need is obvious, but the process will tell me in the way of outlining the use case, we see a requirement which is going beyond a need. It has a generosity which automatically becomes obvious, saying that it is not something which this fellow wants to do or that fellow wants to do. Generally, these are the possibilities which have to be addressed whenever you are creating a provision. So, coming back to this water drinking facility, we address that simple question. Most of the times it is just that they walk away with the glass, they forget, they do not want to come down from the 4th floor to simply to replace it. So, you have a glass chained to the water drinking facility. Then there is a need to understand that around this facility it must be very clean. So, maybe we will create one more actor, a sweeper. Outside of the fellow who is maintaining the machine, we will also have a sweeper. Then gradually we understand that this facility is inside a building, there must be a lock and key, there must be a security. See, as we progress, starting with this and proceeding, we create more actors. They are outside the system, we create, they are neither developers nor the owners, nobody is talking about them. We create actors who are clearly necessary to make that provision function 24/7. So, we draw focus to functionality and we understand that it becomes a requirement, it is not merely need based. So, it's the idea of need based is good, we are not disputing it, but then it is not likely to give us that kind of a generality which is essential for software development across multiple stakeholders. We thrive on that generalization which we studied in object oriented analysis and design. It is that genericity, that abstraction which has been driving our field of software development towards this phenomenal progress in a short span of time compared to other disciplines. So, use case specification is something which is driving us towards the business and a business requirement. What is the structure of the use case? You can have a complete structure. A use case can be written, each path to a use case is a use case scenario. So, there is a scenario diagram. From the use case you construct scenarios, there are other diagrams in the UML which automatically connect. There is a use case which has a name, it tells you the actors, it tells the flow of events, it tells the special requirements, it tells the preconditions, it tells the post conditions, it tells the extension points. So, the precondition and post condition enable us to structure our understanding based on what we have listed above. That was the strength of structured programming, the block structured programming. Every block will have a precondition, every block will have a post condition, and if you can derive the precondition from the post condition, the block is functioning correctly. In theory, you need not know the internals of the block, which is very essential for component based development, which is very essential for reuse, which we have been talking about using object oriented analysis and design. It can be a black box. Even in block structured world, we have been telling that stepwise refinement, only when possible, when needed, we will explode that block and see what is inside. Otherwise, you just close it. If you can derive the precondition from the post condition, it is working, it is doing what is expected to do. So, what we did was we brought all that ideas which were so nicely in the programming phase into the design, from there into the requirements. This is a progress which was very brilliant, very simple idea called use case, but then everything appears, and it should appear as a business driven case. Then what happens? We talk about development and operations in a very good blend and connect it to your domains and stakeholders. That circle gets a full justice, and a project manager has to simply tweak around with balancing the various ideas, various exercises that happen in the process. So, business driven, which manifest for a formalism in the development outside of the skill set which goes into operations, all this will come together into what is called a requirement. It is more than the need, and it is good, it is a requirement case. The use case diagram here is a simple example where we have three actors: the seller, the buyer, and the administrator. The administrator is there, but just out here, a register. Only in this case he will happen, he or she will happen. The seller has these many activities to do. He can look at the sales history, based on which he will decide which item will be for sale or which one to withdraw. This is an auction system. The buyer will register himself and then look at what is the auction catalog. They make a bid for an item and then take a look at what are the active bids. It goes by the bid. So, depending on who bid maximum, it will be sanctioned. It goes with the approval of the administrator. So, you see the point here is that the most active actors are seller and the buyer. Most of the time these two are in the picture. That is how the business looks at it. That is how the business requirements driven exercise will become faster. The seller and the buyer, they are doing all these exercises, and then we have an administrator who manages the register, so that tracking of the sellers, tracking of the buyers and so on, the auction system goes on. Use cases versus declarative statements. What is new? what is that we were doing earlier on? We were randomly capturing the functionality in terms of English-like statements for a start. Our requirements were somehow believed to be captured in plain simple English. Towards identifying the objects and model them, we started looking at parts of speech. One of the ideas was that, based on the requirements, if the requirements are well written, then the functionality will become obvious. We will automatically know that has been a distant dream. We are not able to list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, these are my functional requirements. We talk about what we require, and hopefully the functionality comes through. We have to rummage through the requirements. The requirements may run into several pages, but then we will have to do that. It describes the system's perspective. The system shall do this. Does not define the context, because we are deliberately plucking it out of the context. Ignores workflow, creates usability issues because we don't do the requirements in a very structured way of listing. As and when we talk to the stakeholder, as and when we think that from this requirement is important, we will jot it down. Sorting the requirements in a manner where they come out cleanly in the specifications phase, not in the requirements phase. This many requirements have come. May work well for batch operation systems. Now, in the case of use cases, describe the user's perspective, define scope and context. That is essential. We need to bring the context at the earliest. We have been talking about one more driven development, context driven development, which we have been talking about. And when we are saying about context driven development, it should also be context driven debugging, because there are defects. Every 1 out of 10 lines is defective. Half of the defects are with the customer. So, when we want to clean up a defect, it should also be context driven. We have been saying that in the field of heterogeneity, in the field of distributed, this is inescapable. So, the sooner you bring the scope, the sooner you bring the context, the better. And use case is giving us that simple idea of bringing it at the earliest. It captures the workflow, because that is where we work. The operations are obvious. You please see how nicely the use case talks about the requirements as well as the operations. Some ideas about operations, good ideas about operations will automatically emerge. Supports interactive systems more effectively. Simple enough that everyone can understand them, greatly aid communication, give a concise view of what the system must do for its users and stakeholders, clearly defines the boundaries of a system, facilitate agreement with customers, places requirements in context, use cases, actors, help. All this is necessary. In theory, all of us are equally responsible, but in practice it is useful to segregate. That is what is called scoping. This is what is scoped here, this is what is scoped here. It reflects the context in the use case, which is very, very important. We need to bring the context very early. The most practical idea of bringing the context was the user story, which came out from the agile. People are talking about so many nice ideas. Agile has improved vastly over the last 2 decades. It is a phenomenal dependency on agile based practices. Today, wherever we go, they are talking about the same. Kanban is one, Play Scrum is one. They are talking about certain nice ideas of agile getting a bit of an extension. User stories can become sprints, sprints can become epics. We talked about refactoring, we talked about pair programming, some kind of a combination of these over a reasonably longer spell, not necessarily strict 8 hours day. It was called extreme programming in the beginning. Agile's original name was extreme programming, where they are very clear. 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock, 5 minutes, stand up meeting, proceed, refactoring. It was originally called extreme programming. From that to lean processes, lean methodologies, from that to agile with a manifesto, it got a wonderful stability today. A lot of expertise is available on agile process design, and then we talk about use cases, actors, helps almost seamlessly. It works, and we scope, we get the context, captures workflow, addresses usability early, helps all of the project team retain users perspective. The user is always on the top, the customer is the king. It was an idea with which we started, it should be like that, and then what we did eventually is that telling about the customer to so many 300 team members was always difficult until this kind of an approach came. Workflow is the best. What we were doing earlier on was a work breakdown structure, which was good, borrowed from several other experiences. This is a workflow which typically tells a way of visualizing the users for everybody in the project team. Supports iterative and incremental development. I am not trying to oversell this, because even using object oriented analysis and design, we are barely climbing up to a 36% success rate. Plenty is to be done. People who comment that it is still not taking us far, we are still doing more work and not really progressing, maybe they should get a tooling support. They might not have been using the entire rich features of the tool. Many reasons may be there, but then it is essential to understand that the idea of use case is very, very nice. It positions what we were looking for all along as a business driven exercise, and that is when we are thriving. Using use cases to drive development activities may start at the business level with business use cases. Well, as I keep mentioning, terminologies have changed. Many new terms have come. We talked about project manager, so many things have happened. Essentially, we like to have the development teams looking at the terms and terminology associated with UML, Unified Modeling Language. Then we are on the same page. Otherwise, we keep distracting ourselves most of the time. This term is not for us, that term is not for us, but then it is true, it is essential to understand so that we prevent confusion at the lower levels of exercise. But then a unified modeling language with use cases is proving to be very good for use case driven development. There is a good tooling support. Using use cases to drive development activities may start at the business level with business use cases, identify business use cases, develop business processes to fulfill business use cases, identify automation opportunities and define systems to provide automation capability, identify system use cases for software applications. Use cases can be used for planning and scoping of iterations. Iterative development gave us the first cluing to get to 36%, otherwise we were around 30%. The 6% growth in the success is primarily through iteration. At the same time, the iterative process was fueled by the need to do on the internet. World Wide Web and internet business models further fueled the iterative process. The risk in iterative process is obvious. When it fails miserably. The chances of failure are also very high. Creation and validation of the architecture and design, definition of test cases and procedures, design of user interfaces and creation of user documentation. So, this is how we envisage the development, and it is very nice to talk about IBM's rational unified process, requirements driven flow down. So, we talk about a workflow which is like that. All are familiar diagrams. It talks about test, talks about implementation, talks about analysis and design, different models, different approaches, different domains, different stakeholders. What is the crux? Traceability. You see, requirements driven flow down, traceability always going up. We should have very good traceability. Whoever wants to find out if they are if he or she is an actor, with access to that they should be able to trace. So, this idea of separation of concerns, which is so essential in this exercise, is wonderful because it makes the business flow. That is the essence of the exercise. The business will flow automatically. Use case driven and flow driven, business requirements, business processes, system application requirements, analysis and design, implementation. See how many models we are able to address. All of them are picked from the diagrams out here, which are facilitated by the UML or a or a simple case tool. We talked about use case here, business use case model, object process model, object diagram, automation, realized by, implemented by, verified by. Across all these models, across all these exercises, now you see the way we are talking about software development is not in the same breadth as phases. The undercurrent of it is all that discipline. We still need to have phases, we still need to decide on a life cycle, we still need to talk about a practice which tells that under these conditions you can crisscross the phase in a life cycle. It is still necessary to choose technology, it is still necessary to define our process, make it fit into a quality framework, talk about the metrics, talk about the measures, talk about the dashboard, talk about system integration, talk about software project management. All these are there, but it manifests in this use case driven flow exactly as business requirements, business processes. We talked about BPR, business process reengineering. This is how it happened. System application requirements, analysis and design, implementation, test. What is the plus here? If we can come up to analysis and design, implementation is just pressing a button, choose a language, it goes. What happened to the programming phase? What happened to the testing phase? All that most of the time is absorbed here. A limited testing, test model, we go ahead and we clear what exactly is happening. What is the necessity for traceability? Traceability helps us manage the flow down from one requirement to another requirement. Keep track of the origin of the derived requirements. Where does this requirement come from? Keep track of the artifact. It is almost commonsensical to note that requirements are all hopelessly interconnected at times. We do not know how to pluck out one requirement without talking about other requirements. They are interconnected. It becomes a big spaghetti kind of a logic, something like a noodles on a plate. We do not know where to start, where to end. That is how it is. It becomes a crisscrossed logic. So, use cases will tell us how to separate them nicely to build traceability. Keep track of the artifacts dependent on a particular requirement. Traceability is key to ensure implementation fulfills the requirements, ensure all requirements are addressed, implementation scope is managed, only implement what is needed, manage changes, analyze the impact of making changes, what is the real impact. If a change is implemented, ensure all dependent requirements, models, designs and tests are updated. So, we have a way of tracking. Traceability is essential. Today we are insisting on two-way traceability because we are also doing bottom up, we are also having skills. So, in summary, what we have been talking about is a picture which is like this and it manifests like this. Analysis and design model, if you are down here, the implementation is just a matter of press button. Today automation is there, automatic code generation is there, testing is also limited because you are strong on analysis, you can do that very easily, and then we do this business flow. So, from software development that was more machinistic to software development that is business driven is a progress which is thanks to object oriented analysis and design. Today it is synonymous with UML. Today there are tools which are synonymous with UML. Today there is literature that is synonymous with UML. All that means OOAD. We talked about object oriented software engineering. We talked about traditional engineering. So, we think that it is very pragmatic to look at the typical applications, not the kind of AI and machine learning essentially or database paradigm or distributed, to put them all together. We think that this unified process is very promising even today, 20 years later, 25 years later, it is still very promising. And what is essential takeaway in this exercise? Traceability, top to down and bottom to top, and we know how to manage which has been happening, which has not been happening. In a completely densely interconnected requirements, we know how to put them together in a very systematic manner, talk about use cases, we keep the user in the mind irrespective of the number of people in the team, irrespective of where they are located, we know where the user is. what the user is doing. They are always at the top, the user is the king. Thank you. We will meet in the next lecture.